Hello, my friends. Hello, hello. How are you? Thank you for stopping by. Thanks for joining me today on the Outstanding Life Show. If you're new here, we talk about recovery, we talk about mindfulness, we talk about overcoming adversity and some of the challenges we face in addiction. We talk about it from an approach where we want to remove some of the stigmatism that can come from the avoidance of not talking about mental health. There's a lot of challenges, especially in 2020. I don't know if you can relate, where there's been a challenge or two or 30 in this year alone. And there can become some challenges, especially when it comes to reaching out for help or admitting we need help. And I started doing these shows, recording this podcast, making these videos, writing the blog post. I started these with the intention of adding more to the conversation. And it is meant to be a conversation where it's back and forth, where we can have a chat, we can talk about it, and we can introduce some new concepts and some new ideas. And this show mainly is not meant to convince you to do something, and it's not meant to persuade you from not doing something. What this show is meant for is it's to help support the person who's made the decision already that this is something they want. They made the decision to live an outstanding life, and this is what you can add to your skill set. You can put that into your toolkit and you can fold that in. So today's topic, we're digging into the concept of gratitude and the idea of gratefulness. When it comes to gratitude, it can be hard. It's a little challenging, especially when it comes to not knowing where gratitude starts. When there's and what I mean by that is when there's nothing but challenges all around you, when there's difficulties everywhere, and it's not an easy, I don't want to say grasp, but there's more at risk and there's more losses, and it can be very challenging to navigate to find that gratitude. It can be challenging to imagine if you're panning for gold and you're sifting through a whole bunch of craziness in hopes to find gratitude. And when you're trying to really squeeze that lemon juice for the last drop and try and get the last ounce of gratefulness and pull gratitude out of thin air almost. In those moments, it's really challenging. In those moments, it's really difficult. And I don't want to say there's no two ways the same, but how we get to that feeling of gratitude can be very different from person to person. What's grateful to you might be different than what's grateful to me. Certain things are a gimme and they're a given. Things like food and shelter and safety. Those are all core staples when it comes to feeling safe, for feeling grateful. But when it comes to where do you start if you don't have anything to be grateful for? Or there's some conversations I've had this year where I'll ask somebody how they're doing, and I'll ask a friend, or I'll reach out to them, I'll let them know I'm thinking about them and I want to know what's going on. And though some of my friends have mentioned, I don't really have anything to be grateful for. And, there's not one good thing that has happened ever since things started happening. There's not one good thing that has happened. And I can only imagine what that situation would be like. But there's been moments in my life where I have felt very challenged, where there's been moments where I didn't know if there was another solution, and it felt very unnerving. It felt very, I felt at a loss, and I didn't know how to move forward or which way was up. And everyone felt like everywhere I looked, it felt like a threat. Everywhere I looked, it felt like anxiety or anxiousness, almost like the whack-a-mole, where everything I would pour something into one and then something else would fall apart over here. And it would go solve over here and then something else over there would fall apart. And it became very challenging to, I almost want to call it juggle, where I'm juggling my way through life. I'm white knuckling my way through life. And I wasn't able to stand and focus on anything to be grateful for. When I'm just skidding through life, when I'm just barely holding on, and by the skin of my teeth, if I'm just barely getting through and I don't know where to start, and I'm not sure what to do, and how am I challenging myself to be grateful when there's nothing to be grateful for? This is where I started writing a grateful journal and or gratitude journal, sorry. And what I mean by gratitude journal is it's something where it doesn't have to be like a whole blog post where you're going to write articles, 17-point slides, none of that. If it was something simple and easy, even just pick three things that you're grateful for. Open up your smartphone. Every smartphone has a notepad. Open up your notepad and write three things down that you're grateful for. And they don't have to be long and deep things. You know, in the beginning, it can be something I was having a hard time putting into context what I was grateful for, especially in the early stages of recovery, where I reduced myself to the same three handful of things, where I would say, I'm grateful to be alive. I'm grateful to have food. I'm grateful for my family and friends. I was scratching the bottom of the barrel to find things to be grateful for. And every day I would open up a new note. And then every day I would write a new note until pretty soon, after a week, after a month, or after, I can't remember, maybe it was a year, where I started adding other things other than food and shelter and like water. It would be, I'm grateful for the sun to shine down on my face. I'm grateful for the laughter of my friends when, you know, we're going out for sushi, or I'm grateful for being able to feed my cat. I don't know. Like I would come up with these things where they became much more elaborate, and I started to challenge myself to being, don't just put down the things that are so topical, surface value. But when I started to put it into words, it's no longer something that exists in just inside my heart or inside my head. I can live inside my head all day long. I can run a million miles a minute. I don't know if you can relate to that, where I'm just pushing myself and I'm not taking a breath. And admittedly, there's still times I do that. There's still times I get inside my head and I don't have that take a step back and take a deep breath. And so when I stop and I write down the things that I'm grateful for, it helps put a marker. It puts like a line in the sand, and it says, here's the three things that I'm grateful for today, and here's the three things that I'm looking forward to the most. And enough of those days added up, and I started forming more than just three, and then became seven, and then 10. And then pretty soon every time I'm feeling that grateful feeling, I open up my notepad and I throw something else in. And after a while, there's like a dozen or 2 dozen. You know, some days it's only three on that list, and other days it's 3 dozen things on my list. And it creates, I almost want to call it a journal, where if you see all these little tiny repeated patterns, and the patterns are growing and the patterns are changing, and these are forming good habits, there's much more to be grateful for when things are falling apart. Yes, they're going to fall apart. But if I'm still taking the minute to write down in my gratitude journal what I'm looking forward to and what I've learned the most, and maybe I wasn't able to um, talk to my parents over the weekend, and maybe that makes me feel like I'm a bad son, as an example. But over the weekend, I was able to be a supportive brother to my sisters by checking up on them. So maybe on my gratitude journal, I'll write, you know, I'm grateful that I can connect with my family. I'm grateful that I have time where I can spend with my family, rather than beating myself up about something that I don't want to say didn't happen, but now it's the first thing on my list for the next weekend. So I'm starting to plan and articulate around this gratitude journal, and I'm starting to put into words more than just the surface level ideas. And so when it comes to gratitude, keeping the journal can help me put it into context and formulate it into existence, I would say. When it comes to gratitude, if we focus on the second point here, do I need to be, do I need to feel significant in order to feel grateful. What I mean by that is, do I, as a person, need to be the one that creates the gratitude? And it sounds weird to say, but do I need to be the one that creates it? Do I need to be the one that, in order for me to be grateful, I have to also feel significant at the same time? And it sounds weird, but they're two different things. We know that they're two different things, but I don't need to feel significant in order to feel grateful. Technically, I can feel grateful without feeling significant. And what I mean by that is I can give gratitude, I can share gratitude, I can feel grateful without the need of feeling significant over something or above something else. And it sounds, why would those two exist in the same place? I heard this story once from Deepak Chopra, and if you're new here, I love Deepak Chopra, and I love some of the things he shares. He's a medical doctor. If you don't know who he is, I'm not sure where you are in the world, but Deepak Chopra was really awesome, and he had shared this idea that the idea of fear and the feeling of gratitude live in the same place, and there's only one. You can only feel one at the same time. So I can feel grateful or I can feel fearful. And if I'm feeling fearful, then there's no way I can feel grateful at the same time. It's going to block out that gratefulness. It's going to block out that feeling of gratitude. It's going to push it away. On the flip side, Deepak shared that if you're feeling gratitude, if you're living your life from a gratitude first mindset, then it's much harder for other feelings to wither their way in or to wean their way in. It's much harder for ego to start taking control. It's much harder to feel anxiety and anxiousness. It's much harder to feel left out or lonely if I'm feeling grateful. And when I put that into context, I was like, there's times in my life where I did feel less. There's times in my life where I did feel like I was missing out, and I really didn't know where to go. I really didn't know how to feel. And if I'm trying to juggle the feeling of gratitude while also still trying to feel fearful, you wouldn't do that. Yeah, like that doesn't make any sense. You wouldn't fight for feeling fearful and grateful at the same time. So when I mention, do I need to feel significant in order to feel grateful? Well, no, those two things don't need to exist in the same place. Technically, I can feel grateful at any point in time. And this is where the previous point we talked about earlier about the gratitude journal. Keeping a gratitude journal can help create a roadmap of almost waypoints where we can see the flutters throughout the day where our gratitude kicks in. And once you start having the data, it becomes easier to contextualize that data. I don't know about you, but I'm much more of a numbers kind of a person. I'm much more of a patterns. I look for things to make sense and I try and find ways to articulate them. And I love sharing what I've learned and I love sharing some of that through contribution. So when I look at the patterns in my life where I felt the most grateful and how frequently that gratefulness kicked in, and when I look at what patterns led up to those feelings, it puts me into a position where I can now start recreating some of those events. I can start recreating that gratitude emotion. I almost want to call it crafting it. And I don't need to feel significant in order to give gratitude or to feel gratitude. And the next part I want to chat about before we finish up is when was the last time that you saw somebody share their feeling of gratitude? Or when was the last time somebody shared with you where they said, hey, thank you very much for doing this. Thank you very much for taking the time. Thank you for someone just shared appreciation. When somebody shares that gratitude with you, there's this feeling inside where it sparks something and it sparks that feeling of gratitude. Somebody feels the gratitude and then is compelled to share it with you. And then it in turn creates more gratitude. You're like, oh, wow, that's really good. That's awesome. Thank you. Someone says thank you to you and you want to say thanks back. And then there's a third observation here where if you see somebody sharing gratitude to somebody else and you're observing it, like you witness it, your friend number one says something cool about your friend number two, and you're that third person there, and it sparks gratitude in you because you saw your friend share gratitude to somebody else. And it becomes like this, I don't want to call it like a Ponzi scheme where we're all sharing gratitude back and forth, but there's a certain point where feeling gratitude and giving it away sparks it in somebody else. And how do you generate enough gratitude in you so that you can give it away? And I used to, and I don't know if you can relate to this, where I used to ration out my gratitude. I used to ration out my, my feelings, and I would tell myself that, you can't tell somebody you're thankful, or you can't share this feeling with somebody. They're gonna take that feeling and squish it. They're just gonna run away with it. These are the addict mind. These are the alcoholic brain making decisions for me. This is me stuffing my emotion instead of expressing it. And when it comes to addiction, when it comes to, I don't want to call it where the there's a certain part of me, I'll call it my ego, makes decisions for me, and this ego is not coming from a place of support. It's not coming from a place of genuine empathy. It's not coming from a place of encouragement and development. It's coming out of a self-serving corner of my life that I don't need anymore. And I need to look beyond it. I need to live outside of my ego and entertain the idea that feelings are okay and it's okay to share them. And even if it's at 2 seconds to let somebody know, hey, you know what, I just want to say thanks and I really appreciate that. And if I think about it for a minute, if I zone in here on the chat, I'm gonna scroll over. Looks like we have Martin here. Hello, Martin. Thanks so much for hanging out. Martin says that he agrees. And so Martin is hanging out with us. We're doing the live YouTube and the Facebook. But I want to take a minute and celebrate Martin because Martin's here hanging out. And I think that's really cool. So something as simple as sharing those 2-second wins, something as simple as sharing the, hey, you know what, I appreciate it. It can go a long way. And cultivating that and then sharing that is never easy in the beginning, especially if you don't have anything to be grateful for in this world of 2020 that we're in. But this is where keeping a gratitude journal can start. And nobody needs to see it. It's just your phone, and no one's going to take your phone and look at it. So if you start a notepad and you just start filling it out, the 3 things you're grateful for today, nobody's going to look at it. After a month, after a week, you're going to start noticing you're adding more to that than you were before. You're going to start noticing patterns of how to create that gratefulness in yourself. And you start noticing what you need to do to help share that with someone else. That's how you can start creating that environment. That's where you can start creating like your own Ponzi scheme of great gratitude. This is awesome, friends. Okay, so before we wrap up, let's go and I want to show you something. I'm over on, if you're watching the live video, I've got a link on the screen and it's sobriety.live/now. And sobriety.live/now, this is just a link. It's a bunch of links to the links to the podcast. If you're listening to the podcast, thank you for listening. And if you're watching the video, that's awesome. So if you want to listen to the show, go ahead and go to the link outstanding.live/now. There's a link to the podcast. Or if you want to catch the live videos, I've got the links to the videos. Or if you want to read and you like the blogs, I've got a link to where the blogs are living. And the blogs are just the transcripts of the videos. I've also got a 30daysofcalm.com link, totally free. And I've got a couple of my popular videos, like reaching out for help or how I became an addict. So these are totally free. There's also a Coursera course, and this one's really neat because Coursera is offering free courses for until the end of the year. And there's even whole courses dedicated to mental health. And again, that's absolutely free. I gain nothing from this, and this is totally awesome. If that's something you're really interested in, I highly encourage you to go and check it out. In the meantime, friends, This is fun. I really enjoyed talking about it. Today's topic was gratitude and where to get started. And it's a little challenging in this world of 2020 that we're in, but I hope it was helpful to you. It's certainly helpful to me. I really appreciate you hanging out. And thanks, Martin, for stopping by. I really appreciate you. You guys take care, and I look forward to seeing you in another video. All right. Bye bye.